This is Metal Cosmology. 50 years of metal in 50 minutes. The history of metal music 1970 to 2020. Episode 2, The Diversification of Metal Music and the Formation of a Metal Subculture 1980 to 1990. The foundational metal albums by British bands like Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Ozzy Osbourne, Saxon, Motorhead, plus their European and North American concert tours in 1980, make a significant impact in suburban kids and working-class youngsters. The fans themselves built the first international metal community, kick-starting in turn the pioneer metal music scenes outside the UK in Germany, Sweden, Canada, Japan, Spain, and both coasts of the USA, plus supporting new local bands in Denmark, France, Italy, Brazil, and Argentina, among other countries. The main channels of diffusion are fanzines, radio shows and tape trading. In 1981 the first supplement of Sounds magazine, focused on hard rock and heavy metal, hits the stands under the name of Kerrang, inciting the music industry to produce other corporate publications. Traditional UK festivals like Reading Festival open its bills to heavy metal acts, while Donington's Monsters of Rock becomes the biggest annual hard rock/metal music festival. Heavy metal lives its golden years between 1982 and 1984, giving birth to classic albums like Iron Maiden's The Number of the Beast, Judas Priest's Screaming for Vengeance, Dio's Holy Diver, or Merciful Fate's Don't Break the Oath. Notwithstanding, what makes revolutionary the 1980s in the history of metal music is the amazing process of diversification of the genre displayed in less than 9 years. This diversification of metal music implies going from a single, unified community to multiple scenes, communities and networks spread all over the world, centered on specific metal music styles. Some of these styles would soon become the first metal music subgenres. The neoclassical musicianship stance in heavy metal is exhibited in all its splendor by Yngwie J. Malmsteen since the album Rising Force, also pioneering the shred musicianship stance from there on, focused on virtuoso lead guitar soloing. Other traditional heavy metal styles are developed, like speed metal, particularly encouraged by Accept's track Fast as a Shark, or epic metal, elaborated by the early US metal scene, with bands like Searoth and Gall, Manila Road, and Manowar. Helloween takes further speed metal, adding into their characteristic double bass drumming some neoclassical arrangements through the guitar harmonies, plus festive European folklore melodies through the vocal lines in their legendary albums Keeper of the Seven Keys, Part 1 and 2, laying the ground for the power metal style of the years to come. Doom metal develops as a parallel style with bands like Witchfinder General, Pagan Altar, Pentagram, and Trouble, all of them going back to Black Sabbath's down-tuned, slow heavy roots. Saint Vitus introduces elements of the punk underground in their music while the Obsessed prevents stoner metal to extinguish. Candlemass pioneers an epic doom metal style with their album Epicus Doomicus Metallicus. Merciful Fate and King Diamond introduce complexity in the heavy metal song structures with numerous time signature changes and lengthier compositions. Nevertheless, the technical musicianship stance becomes exhibited in all its plenitude in metal music only until 1985, when Watchtower releases Energetic Disassembly, forerunning the incorporation of jazz fusion elements into the mixture of heavy metal and thrash. Queensrÿche releases in 1988 the first conceptual, neo-progressive hard rock/heavy metal album of all time, Operation Mind Crime. Twisted Sister pioneers the glam metal style in New Jersey during the first years of the decade. Some bands from the early 1980s Los Angeles hard rock scene represent this style, like Bitch and Wasp. However, the term glam metal is co-opted by a scene not exactly playing proper metal music. LA bands like Motley Crue, Dokken or Rat incorporate slight metal elements in their music, contributing to the development of glam metal, although being just hard rock bands. Many of these hard rock groups become stigmatized today as hair metal. 1983's US Festival in California is the massive event that allows metal music to break through into the American mainstream. Nonetheless, the most important process in the history of metal is a genuine underground expression, shaped by counter-hegemonic DIY initiatives with the support of independent record labels like Neat, Metal Blade, Noise, Combat, Earache, or Roadrunner Records. The main process and driving force of expansion, experimentation and sustainability of metal music is the emergence of extreme metal. There are very different styles of extreme metal, but there is always an underlying component in all its forms, the direct influence of hardcore and its unique mode of expressing aggression, focused on straight-ahead, ultra-fast rhythmic assaults of anger. Extreme metal not only opens a subversive stream in metal music, but also contributes incessantly through the renovation of its forms to keep metal sonically edgy, outside of all political correctness and mainstream values. That includes an unprecedented exploration on the dark side of life and in human phenomena. Venom detonates extreme metal in Newcastle, UK, spearheading punk metal. This style takes further biker punk, combining hardcore with very basic elements of heavy metal, replacing vibrato singing with shouted and grunted vocals. In their 1981 debut, Welcome to Hell, Venom exhibits the very first old-school black metal track, Witching Hour, with harsh vocals and insanely fast and sustained tremolo-picking distorted guitar. A year later, the song Black Metal from the album of the same name, anticipates thrash. Between 1981 and 1987, a bunch of unrelated, subterranean bands living in distant countries create the original old-school black metal style, drawing on satanic and occult aesthetics to express evil. Hellhammer, Celtic Frost and Bathory develop the basic foundations of the old-school black metal sound, while album debuts by Sodom, Bulldozer, Mayhem and Sarcophago keep the style alive, even without a proper specific scene. The incorporation of gothic rock, death rock and post-punk elements in metal music is pioneered by Hellhammer and Celtic Frost. Further to this, Celtic Frost foreruns both symphonic and avant-garde metal through proto-black metal, proto-death/doom and thrash in albums like To Megatherion and Into the Pandemonium. After anticipating full-on black metal with Under the Sign of the Black Mark, Bathory's new music style becomes the presage of the emergence of a folk musicianship stance in metal music, presenting the first Viking metal compositions in Blood Fire Death. In the meantime, Metallica kickstarts a revolution at the heart of popular culture when the band relocates from LA to San Francisco, inventing thrash. Thrash mixes hardcore with heavy metal, but in contrast to black metal and punk metal, thrash is oriented to cultivate musicianship and sharp musical skills through its focus on precision and tightness. Thrash is the style of music introducing mosh into the metal world, the collective corporal activity of participants bumping and slamming into each other in concerts, as created by the hardcore scene. Metallica's incendiary debut, Kill 'Em All, constitutes a musical revolution, combining tremolo picking and down picking techniques with palm muting by a guitar tandem, creating an unprecedented sonic heaviness and metallic crunch with intensely fast songs like Whiplash. Ride the Lightning is Metallica's most important recording due to its invaluable contribution to the evolution of metal music composition, demonstrating that extreme metal can be a platform for experimentation, progressiveness and musicianship. Master of Puppets is, probably, Metallica's masterpiece. The nascent Bay Area metal scene becomes injected with a dose of aggression never seen in heavy metal, expressing the violence of our societies like no other music style did before. The US East Coast develops its own thrash scene with bands like Anthrax, while the same happens in Germany with Destruction and Creator. Thrash is the first style of metal to become a full subgenre, inspiring specialized scenes, circuits and eventually festivals kicking off in both coasts of the USA, Germany, UK, and Canada. In New York the crossover thrash style is pioneered when SOD releases its landmark album Speak English or Die, combining hardcore with thrash without traditional heavy metal. The style is developed by bands like DRI, Suicidal Tendencies and Corrosion of Conformity. Following 1985's debut albums by Megadeth and Watchtower, the technical musicianship becomes fully expressed by thrash bands like Coroner and Annihilator. Before the decade ends, Voivod expresses illustrative gestures of a progressive thrash musicianship stance. But no other thrash band in the history of metal music appears to be so influential and respected as Slayer. It is the band that unleashes the limitless, boundless potential of extreme metal, both effectively and sonically, with songs like Chemical Warfare and albums like Hell Awaits. In 1986 Slayer releases the ultimate metal music album of all time, Rain in Blood, a 30-minute record composed just of straight-ahead songs driven by frenetic hardcore rhythms, including some of the most emblematic guitar riffs ever, plus majestically executed double bass drumming in anthems like Angel of Death. Bay Area thrash band Possessed, through their debut Seven Churches, creates the first proto-death metal record, introducing two key elements in extreme metal, intricate song structures and deep, growled guttural type of vocals. A certain proto-death metal sound starts to take shape between 1984 and 1987, instigated by metal bands in the intent of pushing much more extreme musical boundaries. Most of these bands become recognized in the international tape trading scene without an official recording, only through their rough demos, like Mantas, Necrophagia or Master, and later on Death or Massacre, in the US, plus Sepultura, coming from the underground extreme music scene in Brazil. In their debut Scream Bloody Gore, Death develops the style working within a thrash/proto-death framework, as also Sepultura, in Schizophrenia and the brilliant Beneath the Remains. However, Death's second official production, Leprosy, is the album exhibiting all the definitive characteristics of the style, from the growled vocals and the exceedingly down-tuned instruments, to the serrated buzz of the palm-muted tremolo-picking guitar riffs, the barbaric attack of the drumming, and the gory lyrics, materializing the sound of death metal's main affection, brutality. Between 1988 and 1989 several Florida bands start their transition into full-on death metal, including Massacre, Deicide, Cynic, Atheist, and Obituary. In San Francisco, Autopsy releases another seminal death metal album, Severed Survival. Bolt Thrower pioneers the style in the UK, while the first European death metal scenes emerge in Sweden and the Netherlands. An extraordinary record coming from the Tampa death metal scene is Morbid Angel's debut, Altars of Madness, possibly the most astonishing metal music album of the 1980s, a unique masterpiece of intricate composition and sonic brutality, showcasing death metal as a privileged style for cultivating musicianship. Simultaneously to death metal, the most radical style of extreme metal takes form in the second half of the decade. Repulsion's 1986 demo, Slaughter of the Innocent, is the first proto-grindcore record, exhibiting a simple style of extreme metal based on shouted guttural vocals and heavily distorted low-tuned riffs played over the fastest hardcore rhythms possible. Tracks are shorter, song structures are straightforward, demanding less musicianship skills. Drums include a technique known as blast beat, a radical percussive gesture crossing the frontier where rhythm becomes noise. In Birmingham, UK, Napalm Death Records Scum, the template of grindcore, establishing the required mixture of hardcore, noise, and proto-death metal of the style. This album helps to differentiate grindcore's instant crushingness from death metal's more expansive brutality. The first gore grind album, Carcass Reek of Putrefaction, is released 1 year later, deconstructing all notions of music. Furthermore, the band Old expresses an avant-garde stance through grindcore, and Napalm Death sketches the death grind style in 1989, the same year in which Terrorizer showcases the definitive level of crushingness of this new subgenre with World Downfall. At the end of the decade, the metal community is a social minority, but the audiences are enormous, exponentially growing in Europe, Oceania, Japan, North, and South America. Metal is popular enough to have a program in the MTV, Headbangers Ball. When the record sales of traditional heavy metal start decreasing, the music industry concentrates in exploiting thrash as much as it can. After the success of Metallica's one video in MTV, the music industry starts talking about the Big Four of thrash: and by 1990 it takes thrash to huge arenas in the Clash of the Titans tour. The term headbangers is still used, but the nickname metalheads becomes quite popular in the USA. It is used kindly by the metal communities, but is also used critically or contemptuously by other cultures referring to metalheads expressing a jock mentality. All along the 1980s metal music is, not only persecuted by a religion because of its satanic references and caricaturized by mainstream media because of its macho postures, but also it is often rejected and underestimated by other cultures, because of its uncritical stances and lyrics, misunderstood as dumb escapism. Although some extreme metal bands are critic and rebellious against the system and capitalism, many of them blindly contribute to the reproduction of patriarchal values. Violence during the concerts and denigration of women in the lyrics keep the female participation in a very reduced level during this decade. That is the metal experience in the 1980s, between patriarchal and countercultural. Spreading like a wildfire, the international metal community grows into a subculture before the last decade of the 20th century begins. In spite of its audiences being mainly white, young and male, metal music sprouts in very different regions of the world, from Finland to Australia, from Hungary to Mexico, from Greece to Colombia, just to name a few countries, empowering hard workers, nerds, misfits, and drifters trying to survive to the emotional breakdowns of youth growing in a turbulent era. This is Metal Cosmology. 50 years of metal in 50 minutes. The history of metal music 1970 to 2020. Found more at metalcosmology.com. Look out for the extended version of 50 Years of Metal, The History of Metal Music, 1970 to 2020, as a podcast. And check out Metal Cosmology's videos on each specific metal music genre, subgenre and style at Metal Cosmology, YouTube.